The Japanese Imperial Navy announced the USS Enterprise had been sunk 3 separate times in 1942. Each announcement was printed in Tokyo newspapers and read aloud on radio broadcasts. And each time, the Enterprise showed up somewhere else. Flight deck repaired, air group replenished, and, well, visibly angry. That is how she earned the nickname, the Gray Ghost. Not from her crew, from the enemy. Because honestly, a ghost cannot be killed if it was never where you thought it was. But the real story of the Enterprise is not about luck or myth. It is about damage control, industrial logistics, and a crew that refused to learn fear. The Enterprise missed the attack on Pearl Harbor by a matter of hours. She was returning from Wake Island, delayed by a storm. Her aircraft arrived over Pearl during the attack, and were shot at by American gunners who thought they were Japanese. 6 of her planes were lost that day, but the ship herself was untouched. That accident of weather became the defining pattern of her war. 3 months later, the Enterprise became the first American carrier to launch strikes against Japanese targets, the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. The raids did little damage, but they proved something important. American carriers could hit back. More importantly, the Enterprise learned lessons in those small raids that saved her later. Flight deck crews developed a rhythm of arming, fueling, and launching that cut turnaround time by nearly 40%. What most histories overlook is how the Enterprise survived the battles she could not win. At the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August 1942, a Japanese dive bomber put a 500-pound bomb through her flight deck. The explosion killed 38 men and started fires in the hangar bay. Standard procedure would have been to abandon the hangar and seal the compartment. The Enterprise did the opposite. Damage control teams ran into the fire with hoses and carbon dioxide extinguishers, working in zero visibility and temperatures that, honestly, melted their shoes. They pushed burning planes overboard. They dragged wounded shipmates away from exploding ammunition. They kept the ship in the fight. The Enterprise was back in action within 2 hours. That is not a Hollywood number. That is the actual log entry. By contrast, the Japanese carrier Ryujo was sunk in the same battle after a single bomb hit, because her damage control teams were undertrained and undermanned. 2 months later came the real test, the Battle of Santa Cruz. The Enterprise took 3 direct hits from Japanese bombs. One penetrated the forward elevator and exploded in the crew's mess. Another went through the flight deck and detonated just above the hangar. 60 men died. The ship listed 7 degrees to starboard, and yet she recovered aircraft, while burning, while listing, while damage control teams were still pulling bodies out of wreckage. The secret was not heroism, though there was plenty of that. The secret was the repair philosophy. The Enterprise carried a full machine shop, spare steel plate, and a crew of welders who worked around the clock. Where Japanese carriers returned to base for major repairs, the Enterprise fixed herself at sea. That ability to self-repair turned a 3-month yard period into a 3-week patch job. And, 3 weeks was fast enough to make the next battle. By 1944, the Enterprise was so legendary that her crew painted Enterprise in 10-foot letters on the flight deck. This was not arrogance, it was psychological warfare. Japanese pilots could see the name from 2 miles away, and they knew, from experience, that hitting her did not mean sinking her. The Enterprise also pioneered night carrier operations. In 1944, she became the first American carrier certified for full night combat. That meant taking off and landing in total darkness, using only colored lights and the landing signal officer's paddles. The accident rate was honestly horrific, but the payoff was that Japanese convoys, which moved at night to avoid American air power, suddenly had nowhere to hide. On April 11th, 1945. A kamikaze struck the Enterprise off Okinawa. The Zero's bomb detonated against the port side. 14 men died. The flight deck was shredded. 9 hours later, she was launching aircraft again. The Enterprise survived every major carrier battle of the Pacific War. She was the most decorated ship of World War II, 20 battle stars, the Presidential Unit Citation, and a crew that included more than a dozen Medal of Honor recipients. But when the war ended, she was also worn out. The welds had been re-welded. The decks had been patched so many times that original steel was a rarity. The Navy tried to save her as a museum. Fundraising failed. In 1958, she was sold for scrap. No film of her scrapping exists. Her crew did not want to watch. The name lived on, of course. The first nuclear-powered carrier was also called Enterprise, and she carried the same battle flag. But the lesson of the Gray Ghost is not about names or traditions. It is about resilience engineered into a ship's bones and drilled into a crew's reflexes. The Japanese called her a ghost because they could not believe she kept coming back. She kept coming back because her crew refused to let her die. Subscribe to War Machiner and share this if you value history that goes deeper.